They're all rigged, they're all predetermined. And despite all of our efforts, white folks have their own plans and their own designs. And actually, the only thing they use these elections for is to scapegoat us. In other words, if Gore loses, it's black folks' fault. We never mentioned throughout the campaign, but just as soon as one of these white candidates lose, it's black folks' fault. If more of us had gone out, and now they got this whole thing now about, you see, every vote counts. Every vote counts. Like, your vote means the same thing as Rockefeller's vote. So you gotta really be hallucinating. To think that your vote counts the same as Donald Trump's. You really have to be out of your mind. Your vote does not count. In fact, most of the time, your vote don't even get downtown and be counted. If you want to really deal with it, and that's what we see happening in Miami, where all of the Haitians went out and voted, all of the blacks in Dade County went out and voted, and none of their votes have counted. You know, last night I was watching the election returns, and at 9 o'clock, they declared that Gore had won Florida. Soon as the polls closed, they said Gore has won Florida. And then a short time later, they said, we're going to put Florida back in the undecided column. And then later on, I was listening to Ed Bradley. This was about 1:30 in the morning, or something to 2. And Ed said, well, you know, the only votes that they're counting now are votes from the black districts. That's what Ed Bradley said, about something to 2. The only votes that they are counting now are the votes from the black districts. And then about 35 minutes later, they all jumped up and said, Bush has won. Now, it ain't nowhere in the world that they're going to be counting votes from the black districts and George Bush won. All right? Now, I know we bad all, but we ain't that crazy. All right? Not to put George Bush in office. You know, it's bad enough to have to go in there and vote for Gore. And some of us didn't. But certainly to elect George Bush, you got to be out of your mind, because George Bush is out of his mind. All right? Believe me, this boy is crazy. All right? I mean, he is really out of his mind. And I'm looking forward to him being president because he's our last white hope. All right? He's our last white hope. If George W. Bush cannot bring us together, nobody can. All right? If George W. Bush cannot bring us together as a people and throw away our differences and begin to focus on concrete goals, then nobody can bring us together. Because this boy is going to come in sticking needles in everybody. All right? They got a backlog of people on federal death row that he's getting ready to clean out in a hurry. All right? They got a backlog. He's going to start lining them up and getting rid of them. You know, the worst thing that can really happen, and I had always read about Texas and and read about the vigils that occur in Texas, and read about the frequency of executions in Texas, that is Huntsville, Texas. And this past June, I got an opportunity to go down to Huntsville, and actually, Shaka Sankofa had a list of 4 persons who could witness the execution. And they had really gotten several names to appear on the list, more than 4. And when we got to Huntsville, they said that Reverend Jackson would be going in, Reverend Sharp would be going in, this woman from South America, can't remember her name right now, I'm not big on rock stars, Bianca Jagger, right, Bianca Jagger, and Sheila Jackson Lee, who is the congressperson from Texas. And then we talked to Sheila Jackson Lee, and they said that she would not be witnessing the execution, and that I could go in at her place because I had already been put on the list. But I thought about that thing long and hard, and I said that it would just be too much for me to witness an execution, because I began to think about my own personal experiences with death row when I was a criminal defense attorney representing mostly people who had been charged with murder. And after the trial is ended, how you would walk up and down those hallways for days on end, waiting for the jury to come back with a verdict. And to me, that was really one of the most agonizing, draining experiences that you could ever envision. I mean, trying the case is one thing, waiting on that jury to come back with a person whose life hangs in the balance is another. And I can only imagine what it would be like now, being in a courtroom representing someone who faces capital punishment and having to wait for that jury to come in. And as I thought about that, I said, well, you know, I really do not have the stomach to go inside of that prison and be locked up myself for 5 or 6 hours until this lunatic, George W. Bush, gives a final order to execute an innocent person. And on that night, he did, Shaka Sankofa. And you really can never be the same again. You know, it's one thing to sit here and hear about somebody being executed. It's another thing to be there and have to experience that ritual, because there's a whole ritual around the execution. Before a person is executed, the witnesses are brought into a certain area, certain debriefings take place, the prison chaplain comes around and go through various ceremonies with you, and then they put you on a separate bus and bring you over to the prison itself, and then they take you up into the ward and lock you up, and you just simply have to sit there and wait. And so I really have never had that kind of understanding as to how one human being can murder another human being. until I began to realize that some of us are not human beings. George W. Bush is not a human being. George W. Bush is not a human being. And so this whole thing has obviously been stacked against us, because that whole electoral college last night was just something that they were manipulating. That's all that was. They were just manipulating numbers to reach a certain result. And I think they miscounted. You know, white folks are not as smart as we think. And they overblew the runway, miscounted, did not realize that Florida could not go in Gore's column. And they put it in there and they had to bring it back out. And I don't know whether y'all saw Jesse about 2 o'clock this morning, but this boy was crying. This boy was crying. Jesse literally took it worse than Gore. Jesse literally took it worse than Gore. And tonight, he has organized all of Florida, and they're down there in middle Florida tonight, trying to do all that they can to save Gore. And Gore's not even trying to save himself. All right? All right. Gore's not even trying to save himself. All right. You see, what just don't realize, white boys are going to be white boys regardless of who's in office. All right? They're going to be white boys. Their plight is not the same as ours. And I want to say this. I'm not following nobody whose condition is not categorized the same as mine. All right? I want everybody to listen to this very carefully. If your experience is not the same as mine, I'm not following you, although you could be saying the right things. Now, I did not say anything over the last few weeks as Ralph Nader came to Harlem, or as he was coming to Harlem. But I go back with Ralph Nader all the way back to the University of Georgia, many decades ago. And the University of Georgia at that time, as I have described to you, was a place just one step from being on the plantation. In fact, it was so close to the plantation that there used to be, as I've said on other occasions, slave day. And every black person who lived in Athens, Georgia, had to participate in slave day. And generally, the only industry in Athens was the University of Georgia. Therefore, it was a condition of employment that on that day you had to act in any role that white folks saw fit. And they would march thousands of blacks around town, take them up to the courthouse. They had a big auction block up there. And they would go through the whole 9 yards all over again. That happened every day, every year at the University of Georgia. Now, obviously, when I went to Georgia, they were not ready for me because I was not trying to assimilate. In fact, I was trying to do just the opposites. And so, if I show you some of my photos from back then, I had one of the biggest afros or fros that any man has ever worn, as well as a dashiki for every day. So white folks definitely were not prepared for that. That's why I tell y'all sometime now we get ready to go to these courthouses to make sure you bring your tamarines, your drums, your canes, and all of that. Because I have personally experienced how we can shock white folks. All right? Only thing you got to do is get in your natural habitat. And it scares them to death. I was walking around there, one black man with afro, dashikis, and everything. I had the whole campus held at bay. All right? Now, didn't nobody bother me. They would bother other people, but they wasn't bothering me. See, that's one thing. If you want to back white folks off, don't look like them. All right? And don't act like them. All right? If you want to back them off. So we were talking about 20-some thousand rednecks, most of them members of the Ku Klux Klan at Georgia back then. And I literally had the whole university at bay. In fact, as I've told you on some occasions, I've been in the middle of 300 of them at one time and threatened to whoop all 300 of them. And they all believed it. All right. They all believed it. They thought that they were all going to get whipped. Only because of the way that I was dressing back then. And that's real during that particular period of time. I say all that to say that at some point Ralph Nader came to the University of Georgia. Before he came, I got word to him that Georgia was a racist institution. And when he came, and I tried to talk to him, he looked at me as though I could have possibly had some virulent, contagious disease, and told me that he was interested in consumer rights and not civil rights. All right? Now that was the Ralph Nader that I knew. And he can come to Harlem today and tell y'all anything he wants. But I know what he told me at the University of Georgia. And then he backed off and had absolutely nothing to do with me. So I say that because, yes, he's saying the right things now, but he's not in the same boat that we're in. All right? That's the reason why you don't see nothing in here today but people that look like you. Ain't nobody else got any business being in this room but somebody look like you. And that ain't a matter of being racist. Ain't a matter of being anti-white. It's just a matter that there's nobody else that has an experience like yours that you need to do. That's all it means. It means that there are moments when black folks need to get down to serious business and we don't need any distractions. And I don't have time to teach white folks about the black experience. Nor do I think they should be entitled to know anything about the black experience. Because most of them are only using that to become millionaires and billionaires. That's what this whole hip-hop operation is about, making white folks rich, transporting our culture to other people. And so, as we know that Ralph Nader says the good things, also we must recognize is that Ralph Nader is a multi-millionaire. Now, I'm not going to tell you what I think, I'm telling you what his campaign financial statements say. He is a capitalist with stocks and bonds like all the other oppressors. All right? And personally, he would benefit more by a Bush presidency. That's right. That's right. When you got $5 million or more, all right, you will benefit from the presidency of rich people, especially those who talk about giving you tax cuts. See, white folks don't think we can put all this together. See, they don't think we can put this together. They don't think that we can look at somebody's proposed tax policies and then look at someone else's financial statements and see that there are correlations between one and the other. And so the only thing I'm saying is what I have been saying, and I think that we need to be very serious about this. We need our own political party, and it's not a green party. We need the black party. All right? We don't need the green party, we need the black party. All right? And it needs to be our party. So it's time for a political party. Because the one thing I can tell you is that when I went in that voting booth yesterday, I didn't vote for any crackers. All right? I'll tell y'all that right now. I didn't vote for any crackers, which is consistent with the way I always vote. So these crackers don't ever get my votes. I don't care who's running. I don't care who becomes president, because they gonna all do us in. All right? Just like Hillary getting ready to do us in. Now, she came on television tonight and said that her first priority is to deal with the economy upstate. All right? All right, and these folks ain't voted for her at all. These folks ain't voted for her at all. She said she getting ready to jump on an airplane right now and go upstate and try to cure the economy. Now, if you know anything about how to cure the upstate economy, all right, you know anything about how to cure the upstate economy, all right, that means that more of us is going upstate. The only thing that we did was endorse our device. But see, you can't tell these Negroes nothing. All right? You can't tell them nothing. Only thing she's going up there now looking for a new prison space. That's all. She's up there tonight looking for new prison space and to come back and create new laws that will put more blacks behind bars. That's what she's about. But see, we don't ever learn. Those who fail to learn from the lessons of history are condemned to repeat them. History don't mean nothing to us. It's irrelevant. She was behind her husband building all these prisons. She don't like no men, especially black men. And I want to get into her love life. She got a real motive for sending you upstate. And Carl McCall and Charlie Rangel ain't gonna be able to bust a grape. You see, the real danger in electing white folks to office is not electing them to office. That's not the problem. The real problem is making them accountable. See, it's not the question of whether you can elect an office or not. The question is accountability. And these Negroes are too afraid to make somebody accountable. Eliot Spitzer got in office on the black vote and barely won then. And part part of his promises was that he was going to review the Brawley case and was going to be fair and throw out the suspensions because the period had already run. He was going to recommend that I be reinstated. Not only has he done none of the above, but all of the Negroes who endorsed him are afraid to knock on his door to remind him of what he said. All right? That's the condition that we're in. And yet, every time somebody runs for office, they want you to get behind that person, like you done lost your mind. Now Hillary Clinton getting ready to really do something. But she didn't have to worry, she didn't get my vote. All right? I can tell her that. Whatever she does, she didn't get mine. Because I'm trying to get off the plantation. I'm not trying to strengthen some plantation master with more power. I'm not interested in being no house Negro in the big house either. I'm trying to leave. You know, I just want to say a couple things real quick, and then we're going to bring on Brother Runoko. There's been a lot of discussion about the popular vote and the Electoral College. And there were a lot of people who thought that actually the President of the United States was elected by you going to the polls. That does not elect anything. That's nothing but a beauty contest. That's all it is. The popular vote has no legal meaning at all. The Electoral College could go into session on December 18th and elect David Duke as the next president of the United States. Y'all hear that? Now, you are asked to support the will of the people of your state, but you're not required to do so. And so, regardless of what the outcome in Florida is, that is not mandatory on the people who will vote on the 18th of December. They can vote for whoever they please on the 18th of December. But what is the real interest to me is that most of us have never thought as to the origins of the Electoral College. Where did it come from? Well, if you know anything about Europe, you know where it didn't come from. If you know anything about Europe in the 18th, 17th, 16th, 15th centuries, you know where it didn't come from. These people that the white man today referred to as savages gave this white man his government. All right? There were no governments in the caves. Caveman did not have government. The only thing he had was a bat. All right? Okay? So he did not come here with any knowledge of government. He acquired his knowledge of government once he got here. And there are 4 counties in upstate New York that are named after 4 of the 5 Iroquois nations The fifth tribe or nation is the Mohawk. That county is not represented, but 4 of the other nations of the Iroquois have names in counties in upstate. And it was Benjamin Franklin who primarily studied the Iroquois people, because Benjamin Franklin was the Indian Commissioner of Pennsylvania. They had their own commissions. And as the commissioner, he had interactions with the Iroquois. And in fact, the whole idea of federalism, the issue that white folks debate right now, federalism, is a concept of the Iroquois nations, the League of the Iroquois. So this whole notion, when they talk about federalism versus states' rights, you hear it all the time. The power of the federal government versus the power of states. That whole notion that is embedded in the United States Constitution is a part of the Iroquois people. Because the Iroquois people, when they came in contact with the white man, and what we must realize is that all of us, everybody who came in contact with the white man, first came in contact as traders, even black folks. They did not come to Africa and saw us swinging in trees and start pulling us out of trees and putting us on ships. It did not start like that. It started with them coming to Africa, wanting the resources and wealth of Africa, and our being able to trade with them. It was only when they were able to get a gun and use that were they able to have some balance of power over us. But short of the gunpowder, they came to Africa to trade with us. Same thing with the Iroquois. But in that trading with the Iroquois said, you don't know how to trade. And you don't have an understanding of government. And in order for us to do business with you, we got to first teach you the laws of government. And they laid out the United States Constitution right then. The white man tried to use the Articles of Confederation, but the Iroquois said, no, you can't use that. That's not a workable document. That's not a real constitution. And so, as they're talking about the Electoral College, as they're talking about their system of government, they never give credit where credit is due. They never give credit. And the bad part is that we're sitting up there and don't even know any better ourselves. Where we should be teaching our children. That's the reason why we're out here on Wednesday night, so we can learn something and go back and teach somebody something. And truly explain to them what is really going on. For example, if you go into the House of Commons, it's like a war zone in England. Crackers are fighting all over each other, swinging, spitting, and doing the whole 9 yards. When you turn on C-SPAN, you would notice one white man speaking at a time. That is from the Iroquois people. When you hear them say the junior senator from New York, that is a custom of the Iroquois people. All of these things that you see on C-SPAN, everything you see a white man doing, he was taught by the Iroquois people. All right? So you don't hear them on the Senate floor say, Mr. Kennedy. Because the Iroquois said, no, you don't call people by their names in government. You refer to them by their titles. And so when you start talking about the electoral college is a product of the Iroquois people because that's the way that they chose their leaders in the Grand Council. You see, so it makes a big difference when you understand the origins of things and realize that people came out of the cave, came out with nothing. And everything that they know has to come from somebody else. Now, people say, well, what are we going to do tomorrow? What we're going to do tomorrow is vote, but vote without dollars. We got to stop giving 95 cents out of every dollar to some other community. All right? That is a serious trade imbalance. That's a serious trade imbalance. It is amazing that we've been able to survive this long behaving like that. Anytime that you're sending 95% out of every dollar outside of your community, it's a miracle that you're still here. And that's the problem that we got to address. And that's the problem we got to deal with. Because we cannot continue to give white folks these kinds of monies and to strengthen them in the way that we are doing so. As we get ready now to do our love offering, let me say a few things. Next week, please bring some non-perishable items. Friends,
our chairman, another hand, please. Please. We need to remember at all times to show those who walk on those treacherous waters and speak and act on our behalf. We need to always show them love and gratitude. Applause isn't always enough, brother. Let's stand up and welcome our brother, Runoko Rashidi.
Brothers and sisters. Mother Franklin, Sister Sybil, do I have your permission to begin? I'm delighted to be back at UAM. I get a chance to lecture for the United African Movement about once a year, and I always look forward to it. As a matter of fact, if I haven't heard from Sister Karen Mason or Minister Brown or Brother Alton over a period of time, I'll get in contact with them, because I know that this is the home of African people. And not just any African people, but conscious African people. African people committed to the liberation of African people. And it's always special to come here too. I have already acknowledged Sister Sybil Williams Clark, I'm still in love with her husband, Dr. John Henry Clark, as indeed many of us are. Mother Franklin, Bobby Pollard, Mr. Brown, Alombe Braff, and so many distinguished people. But the UAM is always also, perhaps first and foremost, the home of Attorney Alton Maddox, my brother, Alton Maddox. And Alton Maddox is a hero of mine. Not only do I admire him, but I genuinely like him. I like his confidence, and I like his unswerving and unrelenting commitment to African people. Okay? Give him a round of applause. I learned a lot from him in terms of not just what he says, but the manner in which he says it. Okay? I enjoy my brother. And so tonight, this lecture is dedicated with all due humility to Brother Alton Maddox, but not just to Brother Alton, but Sister Leola Maddox. Because what... because as I always say, what good is a king without a queen? Okay? And she is the queen. Tonight's presentation is called The Global African Presence. And I'm going to be showing, I try to do as many slide presentations as possible with a maxim that seeing is believing and a picture's worth 1,000 words. And it just takes me a minute or two to catch my breath after the drum procession. I always feel a little bit like African royalty. You know, give the drummers a round of applause, okay? And being the shy and bashful person that I am, it's always a bit disconcerting to me. Now, the last time I was, in fact, in times gone by, I've had a chance to talk about subjects that are near and dear to me. I think the first time I spoke here, I talked about the African presence in India. And you know, India has more black people, has more Africans than any country in the world. And not only that, but it has the most oppressed population in the world, the black untouchables, people who are thought or deemed to be so foul and polluted and contaminated by Hindus, most of whom are white. You know, India is the most racist country in the world. And a lot of them over here, you know what I'm talking about. But I'm very drawn to the black populations there. Some of these brothers and sisters, even today, in the so-called new millennium, can't even walk with their heads held up. And it's not unusual, as I say time after time, for them to be forced tonight as we speak in various parts of India, these black people who are taught that they are suffering today because of karma and rebirth, because of sins that they supposedly accumulated in previous lifetimes, for them to be forced to eat human excrement and drink human urine. This is the status of our brothers and sisters in that part of the world. There are more black untouchables, or Dalits, they call themselves, which means crushed, broken, and oppressed brothers and sisters in the combined populations of England, France, Belgium, Germany, and Spain put together. You know, something like 200 million of these brothers and sisters, and I correspond with them regularly. So the first time I was here, I had a chance to speak on that subject. And then after that, I believe that I did a presentation on the black populations in Australia and Tasmania. You know, black people who, until recently, were shot to death for use of dog food. As a matter of fact, I was doing a radio interview in Chicago. I just flew in from Chicago yesterday, I think it was. I travel so much, sometimes I wake up and don't even know where I am. I was doing a radio interview a couple months ago, I guess in Chicago, during the time of the Olympic Games, and I enjoyed the Olympic Games. Not only do I like to see the African athletes compete, but you get an opportunity to see black people from all over the world, places you normally don't associate black folks with. For example, there was a contingent of brothers and sisters from East Timor, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that tonight, way in the South Pacific. And there was another sister, a beautiful black woman, black woman from Sri Lanka, a sprinter. I saw black people performing for Portugal and Italy, places that I didn't even think there were many black people today. I did this radio interview. I was popular during the Olympic Games because I had just come back, popular in some circles anyway, because I had just come back from Australia with a group of brothers and sisters over there. And I'm doing this radio program, and this white boy calls in. This is a station that goes out to maybe 40 states. It's called the Nate Clay Show. As a matter of fact, Nate Clay is a black journalist and an anti-slavery man. Nate and I became very close in Costa Rica and Venezuela over the last couple of years from doing a series of conferences where he talks about African people who are enslaved today in Mauritania and in Sudan. And we really hit it off. We have a tour for Kenya and Tanzania, the Swahili coast, that will end up in Zanzibar in April. There's some flyers in the back. Nate has his radio program, and I'm doing an interview with him. And this white boy called in and said, you know, Mr. Rashidi, one of the places that you spoke in or took the group to is a place called Cairns in northern Queensland, which black people call KKK country, and justifiably so. A lot of the Boers, those crackers from South Africa, you know, fled to this part of Australia when the ANC was coming to power. And he was talking about a murder trial that took place in the I want you to hear this now. To me, this is very profound. In the mid-1900s, he talks in the city of Cairns in northern Queensland on the eastern coast of Australia. And a white boy was accused of murdering a black man. He shot him to death. And he got off, he was acquitted because he was able to reproduce, he showed a Xerox copy of a hunting license that had been handed down from his grandfather that gave white people the right to hunt the indigenous people of Australia. Now, I heard a lot of things. I know, for example, that until 1967, these brothers and sisters were not considered humans by the government. In fact, it was not until 1967 when you had a national referendum in Australia that they were given the right to apply for a passport, a marriage license, a birth certificate. So I heard a lot of stuff, but I had never heard anything like that, and I was prone to dismiss that. And so a few minutes later, another white boy called in and says, yes, that's absolutely right. That until quite recently, you could get a license in Australia to hunt and shoot black, just like you could get a fishing license. And the second time I was here, I talked about that. I talked about the black presence in Australia and the black people who were totally exterminated in Tasmania. And all of them wiped out, every last single man, woman, and child. So when you hear about a Tasmanian devil, you're talking about a two-footed white man that came to that part of the world and is still there today. But this is a Holocaust that you never hear about. This is a Ma'afa that you never hear discussed. And then I think the last time I came after, or the time after that, I had a chance to talk about the black presence in Southeast Asia and the Philippines. You know, in this part of the world, black people are the indigenous people. And there too, we're the victims of white supremacy. And I don't consider Mongoloid types, Asians, anymore our brothers and sisters than white folks. You know, the idea of third world and people of color uniting, I have real problems with that. I believe that the only folk who are going to save us are the folk in this room, and these are black people that I'm talking about. And then the last time I was here, so this is the 5th time, according to my mathematics, I had a chance to talk about the African presence in Europe. I just got back from Russia, where I was over there to celebrate the 200th anniversary of the great African Russian poet Alexander Sergeyevich Pushkin. And I couldn't get out of Russia fast enough. I was glad to go over there to celebrate the 200th anniversary of this brother. But the Russian Federation has a population of about 146 million people. And of that 146 million, you have 14,000 black folk. 14,000 out of 146 million. That at any given time, you could walk out on the streets of Moscow or St. Petersburg and be confronted by these racist skinheads. And I had a chance to talk about that the last time. So tonight's presentation is kind of a composite of all of that. It's called the Global African Presence. I'm going to talk a little bit of, just a tiny bit, and show you a few pictures in terms of India, and just review real briefly the life of Alexander Pushkin, but mostly what I want to talk about is the travel experiences that I've had since the last time I was here, which was last September 1999. Since then, I've had a chance to travel to, I think, 17 or 18 countries, and I've lectured in 14 of those countries. The ancestors have really, really blessed me to be able to travel all over the world, and I hope represent you as a kind of an African ambassador, and also to get information and bring it back and report it. So tonight, in a sense, is a progress report. I'm going to do it in the form of a slide presentation. I think you will enjoy it. I have a lot of beautiful photographs, and it's going to take about an hour. So I want you to come with me. Come with me tonight. I'm going to be your tour guide. I'm going to take you all over the world. In a sense, you could say I'm going to show you, in many cases, some unexpected faces in unexpected places. Okay? And again, tonight's presentation is devoted and dedicated to Brother Alton Maddox and Sister Leola Maddox. Once again, give them a round of applause. Now, having said all that, let me see, is there some way, Brother Clemson, that we can dim the lights and turn on the projector? And I may need to move this out of the way. I don't want to mess up anything, but I know you all are going to have problems seeing over there. Cambodia, Canada, Fiji, Germany, the Netherlands, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Namibia, Australia, Trinidad, Guyana, Costa Rica, Barbados, Curacao, and I was in England this time last week. And African people are in all these places, as you know, and we're struggling and scuffling. Now, this piece, for example, right here takes us to Canada. What I'm going to do is look at the African presence, ancient and modern, and I'm going to try to do it through my own eyes, or show it to you through my own eyes and through my own lenses. Now, this piece is about 1,000 years old. And it's important to be able to point out again and again that our history over here did not begin as enslaved people. And I always say, as many people do, that slaves didn't come from Africa anyway, but that African people were captured in Africa and enslaved. But our history, even in America, does not begin with that process. In fact, I always say, if you want to look at the history and understand the history of African people, can everybody see clearly? You may need to move your seat a little bit. Three phases need to be looked at. Number one, that we are the parent population of the world. That African people, black people, I use the words as synonyms, are the original people on the planet. And as the original people, the aboriginal people, the indigenous people, we traveled all over the earth. And our descendants are there today. But it's not enough to say that you were first. One of my great teachers, Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, has taught me, Runoko, it's not enough to say that you were number one. You have to be able to talk about what you did. And so we then look at the role of African people in the development of classical civilizations. That is to say, cities, towns, and villages, writing systems, the use of metal weapons and tools, agricultural science, etc. Black people at the forefront of all of that, of arts and science and technology. And then there's the enslavement process. There's the enslavement period. The problem is, when I went to school, and it probably wasn't much different for you, is that we begin with the third phase, with the enslavement period. And as a result of that, most of us grew up with the stigma. History began with slavery. And therefore, we have a barrier, we have an obstacle from the very beginning. So this slide is designed to contradict that. Again, this piece is about 1,100 years old. I found this in a book about 15 years ago. I was working on a book for Dr. Ivan Van Sertima called The African Presence in Early America, Brothers and Sisters. And my job was to do an article on the black presence in prehistoric America. That is to say, black people as the first people in the Western Hemisphere. And this is one of the slides that I was able to come up with. Now, this is not in Mexico. This is not among the Olmec civilization. This is in eastern Canada. And so last January, in fact, this January, I was invited to speak in Ottawa. That's the farthest north in North America I've ever been. And it was late January. You can imagine how cold it was for a brother like me growing up in sunny Los Angeles in Southern California. The night I got there with the wind chill factor, it dropped to 50 degrees below zero. And that was very instructive for me, because I had an opportunity to experience what it must have been like for those Africans who went into Europe in prehistoric times and were affected by those ice age conditions. This is in a museum in Ottawa, and it is only about this big. And there are two of these, and this to me is a beautiful, beautiful piece. Now what I want to do is show you not only African people globally, but in some cases I'm just going to show you some beautiful pieces of art. Now also, one of the things that you notice, in addition to the Africoid phenotype, the full lips, the broad nose, a lot of times is the use of stone itself. Let's go to the next slide. Now, this takes us to India, and I've been to India 3 times now. I've been warned to stay out of India. In fact, I've been told since the last trip, Runoko, Rashidi, if you go to India one more time, in all likelihood that'll be the last trip that you take, because they see us as stirring up the black people over there. One thing that I've found, and I don't know how you're going to respond to this, as bad off as we are, as brain damaged as we are, most black folk around the world, in fact, all the black people that I've encountered globally, I've had a chance to visit 26 countries in the last few years, as the most advanced and progressive black people on the planet. And they look to us for leadership and guidance and direction, which means we have a special responsibility. Brothers and sisters, I don't believe that we were taken out of that door of no return for no reason. I think we have a mission and a destiny and a purpose. And a part of that mission and destiny and purpose is, I think, to redeem our ancestors, many of whom died in the transatlantic slave trade, but many more of whom survived, so that another generation would have a better way of life. I think, whether we like it or not, that we are that generation. And we have a duty and obligation to our ancestors as living memorials to say that you did not die and suffer in vain, and we're here to redeem you. No, we'll go back. I want to stay on that for a moment. Now, this piece right here, this is a beautiful slide, and this is of another group of folk that I've really fallen in love with in terms of the Indian experience. These people are sometimes called scheduled tribes, or sometimes simply tribal people or tribals, and sometimes they're called Adivasis, A-D-I-V-A-S-I-S. And these are the indigenous people of India. Most of the time I talk about the black untouchables, sometimes called outcasts, or Dalits. But these people, more than anybody else, represent the first people on Indian soil. And this particular sister, a beautiful sister, is from a group called the Santals, S-A-N-T-A-L-S. And they live in eastern and northeast India. There's about 10 million of them. Next. Focus it. These black people here that you don't see driving the taxis back and forth from Manhattan to LaGuardia, you see a different kind of Indian. They represent the indigenous people, and we had an opportunity to visit them. Let me just show you 2 or 3 of these slides, and I want to talk about why I'm mentioning them now. Now, this last tour that I took was in April 1999. Next. Next. Next slide. The reason I'm showing this is because I think that all of these people are dead now. It seems like I have a tendency to go places and all kind of things happen after I leave. For example, this part of India, which is in a state called Orissa, outside of a city called Bhubaneswar, where we went to, you can see the Indian Ocean in the background. In fact, this is the Bay of Bengal. Within a few months from the time we left there, there was a massive cyclone and about 20,000 people were killed. And I'm assuming that a lot of these brothers and sisters that we had a chance to interact with were among the victims. They took us into their homes. They welcomed us with open arms. On this trip, on our first night that we were there was a big reception for us. The keynote speaker spoke on the life and times of Malcolm X. Okay. We went to another location, and the keynote speaker finished the program, the moderator of the program, who reminded all of us of Dr. John Henry Clark, the late great Dr. John Henry Clark, who was deep in our hearts. Finished the program with a recital of Claude McKay's epic poem of resistance, If We Must Die. If we must die, let it not be like hogs pinned in an inglorious fight. The next place we went to, in Calcutta, a group of brothers and sisters met us with their fists in the air. You would thought they were members of UAM, shouting, "Free Mumia Abu Jamal." You can't hardly get black people in the United States to do that. And the whole trip was like that. Finally, by the time we got towards the middle of the trip, the police were following us everywhere. We went to a program in a state called Kerala, which a program organized by a group called the Kerala Dalit Panthers, who named themselves after the Black Panther Party. They met us at the airport and says, "Runoko, we have a program to end all programs." I lectured for them in 1998 in front of about 5,000 people on the subject of global unity of African people. It went so well that we decided to come back next year and do it even bigger. So they said, "Runoko, this time we're going to have 10,000 people. And we're going to call it an African Dalit Unity Fest." The police got wind of it. I was summoned immediately. The police followed us from the airport into the office of the commissioner of the police, who first thing he did took my passport. Now, before we got ready to leave, because they had to rally anyway, somebody gave me 3 necklaces with ankhs on it. Asked me if I was a Christian. And I said, "Well, why would you ask me?" This is because you have all those crosses around your neck. And I said, "Brother, that's not a cross. This is an ankh." I explained what it was. So when I came back, this brother had made 3 ankhs, a coconut shell. One of them had red, black, and green beads on there. Obvious. I'm trying to say this is the impact Africans from America have on other populations. There, I could see the consciousness rising tangibly from a radical consciousness to a black consciousness to an African consciousness. And the government of India is terrified of the impact that conscious Africans from the United States are going to have on the black populations there. So they told me to stay out of there. Next. All these people, I'm sure, are wiped out because this was the eye of the hurricane. And for some reason, I was just told to show you these slides tonight. I rarely do that. Next. And again, these are more tribal people. And you can see how black this brother was on the other side of me. He's from a group called the Munda, M-U-N-D-A. And we were met by, in this community, a group called the Munda, the Oran, and the Santals. And this, at that time, was the blackest human being I'd ever seen. This brother was so black, we locked eyes, and I was just entranced. I had never seen a human being that black before. And what was so nice about it was his sense of self-esteem. Here is the only place, one of the few places I've ever been to in the world where the blacker you are, the more beautiful or the more handsome you are considered to be. And it was a refreshing experience, believe me. Next slide. Man, this is also, I think this might be the last one from India tonight because I've talked about the subject before, but I wanted to just review some of the highlights because I don't think I've had a chance to discuss it in UAM since this most recent trip. Now here we are in a place called Chennai, and there's yours truly, and in the middle is Sophia, the Evangelical Church of India, and they had Chennai used to be called Madras. And this is a place where Marco Polo, the Venetian traveler, went to about 1285 and 1286. And he said in his book, The Travels, that here, When a child is born, they anoint him once a week with oil of sesame, for this makes him grow much darker than when he was born. For I assure you that here, the blackest man is considered better than the others who are not so black. And as a result of that, they portray their saints and their idols black, and the devil is white as snow. So these are some very insightful black people, okay? And the brother on the other side is a member of the government. They are not dollars, they're not untouchables. They're of an ethnic linguistic group called the Dravidians. And the whole program was designed to show the connectedness between the Dravidians, these black-skinned people with naturally straight hair, and Africans in the Western Hemisphere. And they were as curious about us as we were about them. And believe it or not, a lot of them will come up and rub our hair. Of course, they had to rub my beard. And they said, "Oh, what good hair you have." Okay? They call our hair good hair. And they were saying, "I wish my hair was like that." And it just shows, I think, some real profound consciousness. Next. All right, now, let me, last but not least, before I show you the new pieces, let me just review 2 or 3 of the slides from the trip to Russia. Now, India was in April of '99. I had a chance to go to Russia at the end of May 1999. And I went there specifically to celebrate the 200th anniversary of the African-Russian poet Alexander Pushkin. I have a strong connection with Pushkin. Pushkin was born of well-to-do parents in Moscow in 1799. He is considered the father of all things Russian. The Russian atom, the Russian springtime, the Russian morning. He is credited with inventing the Russian language because at this time most Russian writers were writing in French. Not only that, Pushkin was considered the most intelligent and the most dangerous man in Russia. And he wrote in a way that anybody could appreciate. For example, the poem by Pushkin that I like the most is called "I Loved You Once." And the first couple lines go, "I loved you once, and my heart will not be still, but I will not trouble you further by it." He was talking about something that all of us could relate to. He fell in love with this woman, and the relationship didn't work out. So they went their separate ways. But he was saying that just because it didn't work out, that doesn't mean I cease to love you. This is an emotion I think that virtually any human being could relate to. And that was the way Pushkin was. He had a vocabulary of 20,000 words. He is the Russian equivalent to Shakespeare, a man who himself fell in love with a black woman named Lucy Negro. Now, Pushkin was not an isolated phenomenon. I had a chance to lecture in Moscow and St. Petersburg. And what they wanted me to talk about was the image of Africa in Russian at the time of Pushkin, about 200 years ago. And after I heard some other speakers at the symposium, I said, no, that won't do. You are given the impression that Pushkin was an isolated phenomenon in the history of Europe, and that the history of Africans in Europe began with enslavement. And I said that was not the case. So I did a broad presentation on the African presence in Europe. Now, at this time, it was popular to have a handful of Africans among the aristocratic circles of Europe. They were considered like pets or mascots. Pushkin's maternal great-grandfather that you see here was born in Eritrea, in the Horn of Africa in 1699 and taken to Russia. He became a major general in the Russian army, and he took the name Hannibal. And it shows a kind of a degree of African consciousness even back then. He was adopted by the grandson of Peter the Great. He abandoned that name, Petrovich, and took the name of an African military hero. Now, this is Pushkin's maternal great-grandfather. I had to go to Russia to get this picture. Couldn't find it in the United States. Next. And this is Pushkin himself. Now, you can't get any blacker than that, can you? This was in the home he lived in when he died. I went in the home he lived in when he got married, the home he lived in when he died. I went to the place where he was mortally wounded in battle. I went to where he went to school. And I really went in search of Pushkin. Next. And this is his library. This brother was so important that when he died, Russians actually stopped their clocks As a result of that, we know he died at exactly 2:45 p.m. on the 29th of January, 1837. That's how bad that brother was. Now, everybody in Russia knows he had African ancestry, but they don't consider him black. They consider him a Russian with African ancestry. Now, for us, there would be no ifs and buts about it, because we are taught if you have one drop of African blood, you're black. And this is his library. It was kept just the way it was when he died, and I had a chance to go through his library, to touch his books, and you could feel the spirit of Pushkin, I thought, right there. Next. Now, I went on several trips after that. I spoke at a magnificent African conference in Venezuela called the Reunion of the African Family in Latin America. And there were black people, some brothers and sisters even came from New York. There were Africans from virtually every country in the Western Hemisphere. Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, Uruguay, Paraguay, Colombia, Mexico, Honduras, all over the Caribbean. And you know what they said? That the number one problem that they confronted was white supremacy. That's what they said. Black people in Peru and Mexico and Bolivia. And then following that, I had a chance, Sister Tanya and I, who's in the back with my table, who has been my companion on so many of these trips, we had a chance to travel to Cambodia. Now, last year I lectured in Thailand twice, and I was told that from Bangkok, Thailand, I could go to Cambodia or Vietnam for very little money. So I couldn't wait to come back because I knew that Cambodia in ancient times had been inhabited by a group of brothers and sisters called the Khmers, a name which sounds a lot like Kemet. And I had only known two black folk, two Africans who had been there. And I couldn't wait to go. This is the largest temple in Cambodia. And what you see around here is a moat that's supposed to represent the oceans of the world. And then this outer wall is supposed to represent the mountains of the world. And then this inner sanctuary is called Mount Meru, is supposed to represent the home where the gods dwelled. Now let me show you a little bit about that next. Now this is the next level. And you climb up there, it's very steep. And it was very wet. It was the rainy season. I could see a few tourists, a few white folks. I was waiting for a white person to fall. Okay. Unfortunately, that did not happen. So I went up there anyway. So you've seen the outer layer, and then this is the next layer, and then you get to the very top next. And that's how they worship God. I believe, brothers and sisters, until we are prepared to worship God in our own image, that we're not prepared for the revolution. We're not ready to embrace that. Next. And these are some of my favorite photographs. I was able to take most of these pictures myself. Some of the pictures that you see will come from books and postcards. Some of them I actually photographed. And you can see, go to the next one, how this tropical rainforest has enshrouded these Africoid temples. You see, in most cases, even the nose is knocked off. That reminds you of Egypt, doesn't it? Somebody should do a project just on missing noses. That should be a research project. Now, you can see down there an entranceway that leads to another city. Now, this civilization is called Angkor, which means the capital. And inside of Angkor is a place called Angkor Thom. Not Uncle Tom, Angkor Thom. Now let me show you what you see inside Angkor Thom next. First, you see this mass of ruins, and if you look very closely, you can see these monumental African faces next. Like that one. Hundreds of them. Brown stone, full lips, broad noses, black people. Next. Look at that one. These are my own pictures. I'm very proud of them. Hundreds of them. But you don't see them in a book. Unless we write the books. Next. This is in the capital. This is in the largest Buddhist temple in the capital of Cambodia. Look at the hair, bronze skin. Next. And this is what has happened to most of those statues. Now in Egypt, we see the noses knocked off. In Cambodia, the entire head has been